Hello, gorgeous humans. Welcome back to Iconic, the podcast with myself, Lynda Stretton. And today I'm joined by my beautiful friend, Giulietta, aka Hormones in Harmony. I will let her introduce herself in a minute, but I'm really grateful to Giulietta for coming to have this conversation because around 2 years ago, when I was heavily pregnant, I did a podcast recording that I never aired. It was one of those things like we recorded together. It was for my old podcast, Embrace Your Feminine Essence. And it was an incredible conversation. And life took over and it never aired. And I said, if you say no to me, I'll understand, since I just made you speak to me and never used it. But she's come back for more. And with today, this is such an exciting and such an important conversation. We're going to be talking about, obviously, we're going to talk about hormones and women's health and all the different things. We're also going to dive into navigating perimenopause, full stop, stroke navigating it as a business owner, because I am of an age where I am now in perimenopause, even though I try and live in denial. And I know many women are in situations like me, either, done the corporate job and then got to that point where you can't do it anymore, and then like setting up a business later in life and then kind of navigating that with new kids, or always had a business, but then suddenly like start to question who you are and what's going on with your life and all the different things because of perimenopause. So welcome, Giulietta. I'm so excited to have you.
Hello, it's good to be back. And I think we can have so many conversations, can't we? So like I will come back again and again and again and again, whether you air them or not.
I know. And I've still got that recording. I need to dig it out and put it out somewhere because it still exists. And I bet it was a great combo. So let's kick off by telling everyone a little bit about you. So I would love to hear, a little bit about you, your journey to doing the work that you do today, how it all came about and all the different things.
Yeah, so I call myself a menstrual cycle stroke hormone nutritionist. And that's really my sort of main focus is nutrition to support the menstrual cycle and hormones in general. I came to this work really through my own struggles, that happens to so many of us. Very condensed sort of like history of my hormones was I got my period very young at age 9, felt very disempowered for many years because nobody really educated me on any of it. Then I took the pill because that's what you did, I marched myself to the GP at about the age of 17 and I was like, I want to go on the pill because that's what women do. It wasn't really for any particular reason. To me, it looked like a rite of passage. So I did that, felt horrific on this pill, really lost my mind, really felt awful, kept on going back, getting my pill changed. And eventually, I think that's the first point in this hormone journey where I realized that I had to really trust what my own body was telling me. And I stopped taking the pill because it was pointless. And, it was just not even working as contraception because I wouldn't let my boyfriend near me. Later on when I was in my sort of 20s, I wouldn't even let my boyfriend look at me because what I was going through mentally was so horrific. I couldn't deal with anything. And then I think fast forward to like mid-30s and I experienced lots of changes in my cycle. Eventually got a diagnosis of fibroids, which are just these little growths, in the womb lining, in the muscle. They're, usually benign, but they can cause problems. And again, I went to the doctor and I was told the only thing that would sort of like support me would be the pill. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So then obviously that really motivated me to seek solutions and support outside. I did nutrition. Really, really helped. Felt quite on top of things for a while. And then, I would say like late 30s, early 40s, the perimenopausal changes started appearing. And that was like the next part of the journey, right? You're like, oh, I think when you're younger, you have this naive notion that once you balance your hormones once, you're always going to be all right. And that's not really the case because of the shifts that happen. Of course, the foundational stuff is great, but new challenges will come along. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned is you've just got to be open to changes taking place and just have a bit of humor with it. And because if you don't, it's just a bit too much sometimes.
Yeah. And I love your humor because you bring that to Instagram, but can we just rewind? You started your menstrual cycle at 9. What did you even know what was happening? Like, had you been prepared? Did you know what periods were? Had your mum started her periods early and prepared you? Like, what was that like?
No, I had no idea. I still remember the day in those days, well, I grew up in Gibraltar, and the school hours was you went to school in the morning, then you had a 2 hour lunch break, and then you went back. It's very like siesta time in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And I came home from school one morning and I was bleeding. So I told my mum. We lived with my grandparents as well, so my grandmother and my mum were like, I could tell they were fussing. I could pick up on obviously panic. No one had any sanitary products because my mum used tampons, and clearly I wasn't going to use a tampon at 9. And my grandmother was obviously already postmenopausal. The problem is all the shops were shut because this is like the Mediterranean, like however many years ago, everything was shut. There was nowhere to get a pad. So I clearly remember my grandmother giving my granddad's handkerchief, one of his big handkerchiefs, and I rolled it up and just put it in my pants and went back to school. Didn't have a clue what was going on, and I think, it's not my mum's fault or my grandmother's fault. They're so unprepared for this. We lost that kind of tradition of passing on this wisdom through generations. So I had no idea what was going on. I think then I was given a book that kind of explained how babies were made, but I didn't really know what my period or what this monthly bleed had to do with having a baby. Do you know what I mean? You're like, what?
Yeah.
So for many years, it was just an inconvenience. It was a source of huge stress. Like looking back now, for example, like our PE uniform, it was white, like what they call like bloomers, like hot pants almost. Like, how is that something, a girl who's menstruating should even be forced? I was forced to wear these things, it was horrendous and very traumatic, I think, and it's something that I think I probably, maybe one of the reasons why I subconsciously went into this work. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like just so passionate about educating and not allowing that to be the common experience for most girls.
Yeah, I mean, because I was 14 when I started my period. So, and even I hadn't had a conversation by then. I think my mum gave me, I don't even know if it exists anymore. There used to be a book that went around when I was that age called Have You Started Yet? And it was about periods. And I think I probably got given that when I was like 13 or something, but I never actually had a conversation about it. So when I started, it was all very secretive. It was like, I was like old enough to go to the shop and buy. So I started my periods and went to the shop and bought myself stuff. And just like got on with life. It was like, didn't even talk to my mum about it.
No, I used to secretly steal my mum's tampon, the leaflet inside the tampon, and I used to study it because I knew that if I could work out how to put in a tampon, my quality of life would be improved drastically, right? Because I would no longer have to wear bulky pads and ththings like that. But I couldn't work it out. And it was this mysterious, I still remember, that diagram, like it's kind of like a female body sliced in half with the uterus. And I'm looking at this going, oh, what does this mean? I need to work this out. I need to be able to put a tampon in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then, by the way, everyone, you don't want to use tampons really, if we can avoid them.
No, if you can avoid, absolutely. But at that point, I
know they used to be the best thing ever.
I mean, like, gosh, I wish there'd been period pants in those days and all sorts of things, like the products were rubbish.
Yeah.
And obviously all the adverts were just telling you that the narrative was like, you can lead your best life on your period. There was no thing about, oh, maybe at this time you should do things differently. There was nothing. So I was just obviously trying to push into that, well, I want to be the same all the time. And I don't want my period to be an issue. And I don't want anyone to know I'm on my period. So the tampon held the key to all my problems.
Yes. Tampon was the secret. Yeah. So let's talk. Sorry, I just need to cough 1 second. Perfectly timed. So you found this work. So tell us, what was your transition? Did you come in as a menstrual health expert from the start, or did you start off in a different place? How did it happen?
I started off with general nutrition, to be honest with you. And actually, where I started was weight loss. And I know weight loss for you is like a big theme, right? And we've shared a lot of messages on this already. But, when you don't know where to start, and a place where people are always going to be willing to pay you is weight loss because of all the cultural conditioning, the messaging, everything. But it never, ever sat right in my body. I used to feel so uncomfortable, even though what I was teaching was, like what you do, very sustainable, getting away from dieting. But people, they wanted quick fixes. And I really felt so uncomfortable in that field. I can see you it's so true, and it never sat right with me. And I just didn't like being any part of that narrative, you know, like I just didn't want anything to do with it. I think the way you approach it is brilliant. I love your approach to it. But for me, it was just like, I kind of rejected it all. And I was like, I want nothing to do with this. But I was already working with women, you know, in that kind of whole, and that's where this kind of developed, because it was like, okay, well, I've got my own hormonal issues. And actually, sometimes if you balance hormones, you will naturally, you know, achieve a weight that you desire more, you know, and that's how that kind of led me to that. And actually, I think in terms of, if you want to call them pain points, right, we call that in marketing sometimes, I think weight is probably number one, but hormonal issues are probably number two. So I found it was a transition that still got me clients and people wanted to come and see me, but I had a real passion for it. And that's where I landed, because the weight loss did not sit with me at all.
Yeah, this is really important. Let's talk about this now, because obviously this is a business podcast, so a lot of business owners listening. And I want to talk into this because like you say, we've spoken about this in the DMs. What happened with the whole weight thing with me was, it was obviously I lived a very restrictive life for a very long time because I recovered from the anorexia, but then I kind of became orthorexic, and it was, you know, still like hyper restrictive. I thought I was healthy, inverted commas, but I was actually super unhealthy because my output was so high, you know, on the running machine at 4:45 in the morning, doing my 10K run, doing my really long corporate job, you know, hours at the corporate job, blah, blah, blah. So my input wasn't high enough, and I had this restrictive thing. So when I launched my business, and my target at the time was like burnt out, high achieving women. So high achieving women who wanted it all, and they were just making themselves sick in the process. And then I kept having this, when I learned about like all the things that impact our weight, then it became this like burning desire of like, because I really believe so many of these high achieving women are burnt out because they are so restrictive, because they're trying to reach this, in inverted commas, like perfect figure, this like, just this, you know, the whole plastic surgery figure or whatever it is. Obviously, when I was growing up, it was Kate Moss, right? So it was that kind of look. Obviously, it's a very different look these days. None of them attainable. But so I was kind of like, these people burn themselves out because they're avoiding fats, they're having low calorie, they're doing X, Y, Z, you know, they're restricting, they're skipping meals if they're going out for dinner in their evening, right? They've got all these different behaviors because they're so worried about gaining weight. So I was like, I need to teach it. I need to teach them it's not about calories. And I sat with it for 2 years, and I was just like, I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want to make people feel like they need to lose weight. I don't want to be part of it. And then it just got to that tipping point, was like, I am the problem. I have the knowledge and I'm not telling them. So I need to teach it. And so those first 2 rounds of me running it was so aligned. They felt so good. I was so like loving this stuff. But then by that 3rd round, which I was doing in September, I was just so done with it, because, and this is what I don't like about running a business on Instagram, is playing with the algorithm. And then that thing about like, obviously to get the algorithm known, like to have the algorithm know that I help women with weight loss, it's like doing all that content consistently. So it's like, oh, Lynda's the person to go for like healthy weight loss. But then I started like following people in that niche to try and like, again, associate with the algorithm and all that kind of thing. And it was so unhealthy as an ex-anorexic to day in, day out be talking about weight. And I was just so done with it. And I went to that 3rd round and I pulled the plug 2 weeks before we were supposed to start. And I just like, we're starting this week. I cannot launch this any longer. I am done. Guys, we're going. If you're in, you're in. And if you've not come in yet, like, we're just going. Because it was so unhealthy for me. And it's interesting that it's like now come back full circle, because I was talking to you, because we're going to do a podcast recording as well together, and I'm like about stress and burnout, and that is actually why I started my business. And it's like the one thing I wanted to do when I started, it's like, oh, I do all these different things, but it's like, no, I don't want women burning themselves out. And it's, for me, it's like, it's low self-worth, it's perfectionism, it's people pleasing, it's poor boundaries, all these different behaviors causing them to burn out. And then it's not helped by the fact they're restricting the food and all different things. Anyway, yeah. So my point being, actually running a business in alignment that you're super passionate about, and it's kind of your, and that gets to change. So again, like, I think one of the reasons I'm so passionate about burnout right now, and I've kind of come full circle talking about it, because I'm very burnt out right now, and we teach what we need the most, right? So it's like, we'll just go off on one. I've just spent 6 months in a mastermind run by a manifesting generator, full of manifesting generators. And I adore them all, right? Amazing. Love them to bits. But I'm a projector. And trying to keep up with that as a 42-year-old mum of 2 projector when they're all like in their 20s, it's like, it's been a lot, right? And I'm really exhausted with it. And it's like, actually, I need to take myself back through everything that I teach and get back in embodiment with that. And obviously, as you do that, you want to help other people the same process. So I think you get to change and pivot and do different things at different times, which is obviously what's happened with you. Because when we first met like 2-3 years ago, it was, you know, all about the cyclical living, and you're still about cyclical living, but now you're like, but now I'm going through the perimenopause, everything's a bit different.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I think that is probably the key message, one of the key messages we're going to touch on today, right? Which is it is okay to pivot. There is no shame in changing what you're doing. I really feel the most important thing is always to be, like you say, in alignment, to feel congruent with what message you're putting out there. And for me, I absolutely love the cyclical living aspect, right? And for me, it's almost like this journey, and that cyclical living is like if if you're still having periods and having your like an active menstrual cycle, it is like the cherry on the cake, right? Because that's the thing that, you know, sort of really encourages you to be unapologetic about yourself. It encourages you to tap into what your body needs, all of those things. But then it gets to a point where the cyclical living model is no longer fitting quite right in your body, right? You're like, like I'm always sharing, like, for example, I am now on day 8 of my cycle. And actually, nowadays, this kind of inner spring, this follicular phase, it feels like I'm on my period. It honestly feels like I want to withdraw. I want to eat all of the crap, which is fine. And I do, you know, I don't really want to be too much out in the world. My moods are all over the place. And, you know, when you start experiencing this, again, you go to like, what's wrong with me? Have I done something wrong? You know, do I need to think about my nutrition again? And then you're like, oh, actually, it's perimenopause and things are just becoming topsy-turvy. And it's okay to own that, you know. And I think if you've done a bit of cyclical living, then you know that you can give yourself that permission to just get curious, explore a bit, you know, and starting to own it a little bit more, you know. And I think you start talking about this because every time I mention on my stories, oh, you know, perimenopause, what a joy, you know, for whatever reason, I just get loads of messages from other people who are like, yeah, me too. Thank you for saying this, you know. Like yesterday, I was like, oh, day 7 feels like day 1. So many messages. Yeah. People were like, yeah, me too. Also, my inner summer is an absolute nightmare in perimenopause. You know, I'm anxious. I can't sleep properly, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, let's normalize all of these conversations, you know. And that's what I am now really drawn to talking about, like how that cyclical kind of experience changes in perimenopause and everything else about perimenopause. But I just think we need to have as many conversations as possible about this so that we don't sit there going, am I the problem? What's wrong with me? Do you know what I mean? Like it's a conversation that everyone's having. So we can really identify when these things are happening to us.
Yeah, because it's kind of that attention's being brought to the menopause. And obviously, you know, Davina has done a great job. I mean, I haven't read a book or listened to anything she said, and I don't really know, you know, if what she talks about is in alignment with what we would say. But, you know, at least people are talking more about like the menopause. With Davina, there's a few more people that talk about it. And I think more awareness is coming to like, even like postpartum and the changes in postpartum, and actually it's not all about the baby and we need to care more about the mum, but I don't think that's completely mainstream yet, but it feels like people talk about it more. But then the perimenopause seems to be this bit in between that everyone kind of ignores, and it goes on for such a long time as well, because it's not like you're perimenopause one day, you've got menopause the next day. It's like spread it over years. And yeah, interestingly, I'm on day 10 at the moment, and I do not feel like I am heading into, you know, a sprung ovulation whatsoever.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about this off camera, so I'll quickly say it just for the call as well, for the recording. But I was saying to Giulietta, I feel like I've been a little bit in denial about the whole perimenopause thing because I had children later in life. So I kind of had, you know, pregnancy. When I fell pregnant the second time, it was just before my 41st birth. 40th. So I gave birth just before my 41st birthday. That's right. And so I gave birth just before 41st, and then and I'm still breastfeeding like 2 years in, but obviously that first year is much more intense breastfeeding. And so I didn't have my menstrual cycle then. So then when it came back, like there's so many different symptoms that you're like, is this just because I'm sleep deprived? Is this because I'm trying to like run a business at the same time as having 2 kids and blah, 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 blah. And it's actually the last 2 to 3 weeks I've actually been, oh no, I think this is perimenopause. I think these are these symptoms. So let's talk I know the symptoms are really fast, but let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about sort of age, things can start to change, and then sort of some of the things that you can start to notice changing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I see a lot is women go, they Google, they get confused. There's all these definitions, and I would say the first thing is throw all the definitions out the window, ignore them, and just really, really tap into what you are experiencing. You know, what I see quite often is really from our mid-30s, and I want to caveat that with saying it can happen much earlier for some women, right? So always be aware of that. But from our mid-30s, we're not ovulating as regularly. So we're not producing as much progesterone. So what I tend to see the most, and what I experienced, was the moods. You know, it's the mental health stuff that really starts showing up. I believe that is the first stage of perimenopause for most of us. For me, it was the mood swings were out of control. And another thing I tend to see is, it's a weird one to describe, but it's almost like you're not quite in your body anymore. You don't recognize your body anymore. The things that you used to do, and this is where your burnt out kind of, you know, woman, your clients come in, the things that you used to do, so pushing more, eating less, eating healthier, in inverted commas, they don't work. They actually make you feel more and more and more depleted. And that's what I see time and time and time again. Then sometimes what you start seeing is sleep getting a little bit more affected, right? Because if you don't produce as much progesterone, that normally has a calming effect, and you're not quite going under as much. That can be a real struggle. Then you get things like, again, not wanting to really focus too much on weight, but body composition. Our bodies start changing. Why? Because that estrogen is starting to very slowly. It's not like a linear decline. It's a bit of a crazy one, but the body's like, oh shit, estrogen's dropping. Let's store it in fat. Let's helpfully store it for later. You know, and you tend to start seeing like, oh, you know, we start, our body shape start changing. And I really feel that those are the first stages of perimenopause. You know, then it's just this general sense that you just don't feel like you used to, you know. And I think one of the issues is we keep on trying to feel like we used to, whereas really what I found the most helpful is like, well, how look forward rather than backwards, you know what I mean? And rather than be like, I want to feel like my 25-year-old self, my 30-year-old self, my 35-year-old self, it's like, well, how do I want to feel when I'm 40? How do I want to feel when I'm 45, when I'm 50? What bits of the older me do I want to bring forward? And what bits are no longer going to serve me? And what do I want to replace them with? You know, because I always find it fascinating how, you know, we never look back and go, oh, I wish I had my 10-year-old body again. You know, like we never do that because we know it's not possible. But we're still always like, oh, I wish I looked like I did when I was 25. Like it's not possible.
No.
But it's really about exploring that. And that's what I see really the early stages happening. I mean, and there are so many symptoms. Another big one tends to be maybe like menstrual migraines, hormone headaches, right? That's a big one that starts happening in perimenopause. The anxiety, like a general sense that you can't quite calm yourself down, is another really big one. And these are the more subtle ones, because, you know, we always hear about, oh, hot flushes, and you might be like, well, I don't have hot flushes, so I'm not in perimenopause. And it's like, I would say the hot flushes are nearer the menopause end. Do you know what I mean? Like nearer the end of perimenopause, not at the beginning. It can be, but very rarely. It's more the subtle changes at the beginning. That's why it's so difficult. Like you say, you know, we're like, is it not? Am I just stressed? Is it this? Is it that? You know, there's so many things that it could be mistaken for, which is why so many women go to their GP, they get put on the pill at a very late age, or they get put on antidepressants. And that's not really that getting to the root cause of things. You know, it's these shifts in the hormones. So my summary of all of that is ignore all the definitions, don't go crazy Googling, and really trust what your body is telling you, and really examine if you're in denial or not, because I was in denial too, just like you, right? For a long time I was like, I would cling on to cyclical living for as long as possible.
And then you're like you say, it's like, well, I don't feel aligned with it because they're telling me I need to go in when I've got my cycle and I want to go out, and then it's ovulating and I want to go in. It doesn't make any sense. If I knew we were going to go here, I would have had a thing ready to share on my screen for anyone watching on YouTube this. But yeah, I would definitely recommend going and Googling, or I'll put a link in the show notes to something you can go and look at, that transition, like the graph that I'm thinking of between when we go into the menopause, because exactly what you were saying, like that our estrogen actually goes a little bit wild. It's like up and down, it's up and down, it's up and down. And that's another thing where you can't actually fully rely on your, like, if your GP hormone test at that point either, because they might have caught you on a high on estrogen, they might have caught you on a low on estrogen. It's kind of a little bit funny. But so that's kind of up and down, but it is slowly coming down. But your progesterone just drops significantly. So it's something like, I might have got these numbers wrong. If you know differently, tell me. It's something like a 35% drop in estrogen, but a 75% drop in progesterone or something.
Yeah, it's roughly that kind of ratio.
Yeah. So
it's
then
the progesterone.
Yeah. So then a lot of the things that come with a low progesterone, so the water retention, the anxiety, the depression, like the poor sleep, you're going to start getting hair loss because progesterone helps support our hair loss, our hair growth. Like there's so many different things. You know, we're getting the water retention, so we think we've gained weight. So then we cut back more, and then we've not got the raw ingredients. And yeah, and I think what you were saying is just what I do love about cyclical living. And I know that you teach it in exactly the same way as I've taught in the past, which is like, this is kind of textbook of what should be happening when, but actually just listen to your body. And it's more important you start to notice what happens for you across your cycle and how you're feeling. And working with that rather than like, I'm ovulating, so I should be on a stage public speaking. I've got my period, so I should be in bed with some chocolate. And it's like, well, no, how do you feel and what do you want to do? So like, I think that's the best thing about the cyclical living movement is we've got women connecting to their bodies and actually starting to listen to those messages, which, as you say, if you've been doing that in those premenopausal years, as you go through the perimenopause, you're going to start to notice those things more. But we also have this whole thing, and I was joking to someone today, like, every time I get a new client, we do our kickoff, and then I generally send them to GP for some blood, so I can get some basic, like, where's the ferritin, where's the vitamin D, where's the TSH, like whatever is going on, right? I don't think I've ever had those tests done, ever, in my whole life. And I was joking today, I was like, I need to book a doctor's appointment and just see, like, is this fatigue literally just a lack of sleep? Is it adrenals? Let's get a Dutch test ordered. Is it a thyroid thing? Because it's it's not chronic fatigue, as in it's not chronic fatigue, but it's like, for me, it's like a chronic fatigue kind of like exhaustion. Like I rarely feel awake.
Yeah. And that's really, I think sometimes practitioners, we're the worst for getting testing done. I have to work with someone to force me to get the test done. So I had quite a few health challenges at the beginning of this year, like very bad skin rashes and things. And I worked with a holistic functional skin doctor. And that's when I did all my tests, because otherwise I don't do them. I love them. I'm obsessed with them, right? But for me, I'm like, and then if I do them
you don't make
myself,
the time.
I don't even look at the results properly. So I need that, at least I've acknowledged that I need that support. But it's really, really important to get those little checks, and just to see where the basics are and get a rough idea. I mean, what we also, I think, need to touch on is sometimes GPs will not test your hormones, your sex hormones, if you are over 40, because they tell you that, yes, you are in perimenopause and there's no point. And in a way, I can see the argument for that, because like you just said, some days it's really high and some days it's really low. One of the hacks I've been doing quite a lot recently is I've actually bought myself a fertility tracker for hormones, and I use it for my hormones, as in, because it does progesterone, estrogen, FSH and LH, which are the other two hormones you need to stimulate ovulation, etc. And it's mainly for people who want to conceive, but the data is very valuable for somebody in perimenopause, because at least it gives me a bit of an idea of, when you have one of those days and you're like, well, what is going on? At least I can look back and I'm like, oh, look at that. Yes, estrogen was on the floor. And it's also telling me whether I am ovulating or attempting to ovulate. And for a geek like me, it's really helpful. And some of my clients have found it really helpful as well to do like fertility tracking for perimenopause, in the sense of just at least so that we know what's going on. But it is really important just to have a little check, to share what's happened for me. Like, one thing that was happening was I was becoming more insulin resistant. So my blood sugar was becoming more imbalanced. And even though, I do like to show up for my nutrition, I'm not like obsessed with like eating perfectly, but I do love to really nourish myself. But I noticed that way of eating was no longer supporting me. And I did run a blood panel, and I was borderline, not quite insulin resistance, but I was getting there. And that's what happens at this stage. So I thought, I need to tidy this up a little bit, and I've had to cut back. I'm not about cutting out carbs or anything, but I realized that I was just eating too many carbs for this stage in my life just now, and I've cut back on that, and my energy is better. I'm feeling lighter and I'm feeling way more focused. And it's not that this is going to be forever, but that shows you the value of testing and checking and just seeing where everything is, because I would have gone down the route of something else, for example, with your tiredness, I was feeling very foggy and whatever, and I was like, hormones, and then I did the test and I was like, actually it's probably issues with insulin, and I'm just not using my glucose effectively. And that's been the thing that's helped me the most. So yes, important to get checked and see what's going on.
Yeah. And what? I'm really glad you've just talked about that. I'm not an expert in this, so I'm not going to speak into it, but just, for anyone who isn't aware, they do talk about Alzheimer's being like a disease of middle age, not old age. And it actually starts kicking in like 30s, 40s. And it actually, like, they call it type 3 diabetes. So it's actually this like blood sugar issues around our age can then impact it. So it is actually really important to nip it in the bud. I'm glad you've said that, because I do keep thinking about getting a continuous glucose monitor as well, just to have a play with it, even if it's for a couple of weeks, and see what's going on. Because again, that's the sort of thing that changes with our hormones, your insulin sensitivity as well. And, when it's different in the first half of the cycle to the second half of the cycle. It might be more insulin sensitive in the morning than we are at night, all the different things, right? And it changes all the time, but actually starting to see what's going on so that you can, because it's just, we live in this world. This is what we do day in, day out, and we can ignore symptoms. So I can just, I have a lot of empathy for people who are just going about living life and then just hearing the messages like, oh, you just feel like that, and you'll just feel like that, and you'll just feel like that because it's one of the things that, with, when I was in my corporate burnout days, I had it all. I had the night sweats, hormonal acne, chronically constipated, anxiety, crying every time I drove home. Like, I had them all. And I was just like, I'm just stressed. I'm just a bit tired. I'm just a bit overworked. It's like, these symptoms aren't just symptoms. Like, these are quite significant symptoms we're having.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk. I'm just thinking about where to go next, right? What is your opinion? I'm going to ask you this while we're here on this conversation, because you were just talking about the carbs thing. What is your opinion on the whole fasting? And intermittent fasting for people perimenopause or menopause versus continuing with the breakfast with an hour of waking? I'm interested.
First of all, I think we have to always bear in mind that we're all biochemically
individual,
different, right? And individuals, and it's really tapping into what can work for us. I think, I don't think because there is a real, it's very polarized, isn't it? It's like intermittent fasting is the best thing ever, and intermittent fasting for women is the worst thing ever. And it's like, I think we have to be a little bit more sort of nuanced about it, and a bit more okay, well, what works for me? I think before you even get to anything like intermittent fasting, you have to be able to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner and not snack in between, right? Let's just start with the basics, because I see people throw themselves into these crazy intermittent fasting regimes, and they've been grazing and snacking for years and years and years, because that's what we were told to do. Or we eat every 2 hours, don't let your blood sugar, all of this stuff. And that just throws us into metabolic disarray. I do think there is an argument for intermittent fasting in perimenopause and menopause, but done very, very sort of strategically, and always tapping into how we're feeling. Do you see what I mean? So the way I prefer to approach it is more like these lovely gaps between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I've seen that in myself, but I've also seen it in my clients. That's where we seem to thrive the most. Is, can you have the best breakfast, the most delicious, nourishing breakfast that means you don't want to eat until lunch? Can you? Because if you think about it, if you can have a 4 or 5 hour gap between breakfast and lunch, that's going to give you those intermittent fasting benefits, some of them, right? You're going to get that sort of little bit of a break. You're going to get a bit of self-care, all those things that we always talk about. And if you can do lunch to dinner as well, that's really, really helpful. Once you get to that point, maybe, just maybe, you can start playing around with your breakfast time. Maybe you want a slightly longer window, right? From dinner to breakfast. Maybe you want to expand to 13 hours, 14, but really, really gently, and only in certain points of the cycle. I don't know if you come across the work of Dr. Mindy Pelz. She's quite a big name in the intermittent fasting world. She's done a book called How to Fast Like a Girl, and it's all about fasting for women. I don't agree with everything she says, because she does maintain you can fast on your period, and I personally, I wouldn't, but she really talks about only fasting in the follicular, like ovulatory phase, and never ever fasting in the luteal, which kind of makes sense, right? Like taking advantage of that. But I think if your hormones are feeling wobbly, if you're not sleeping well, like exactly what you were describing yourself as when you were burnt out in your corporate career, intermittent fasting is not the answer. You kind of almost have to get yourself to a place where you're feeling really good, and then you do the intermittent fasting. And that is another cherry on the cake, I feel, right? Like, and I think for most of us, we don't even have to go that far. Just not snacking, feeling really, and also going back to the cyclical stuff, because I still experience this. It's not in the place where I'm expecting it, but there will be days in my in my menstrual cycle when I'm like, oh, I'm just not very hungry today, and I honor that, and I'm like, okay, so today might just be a day for salads or crunchy stuff or whatever. Then today, follicular, so it doesn't make sense, I could eat a horse, literally. I'm like, oh, today's one of those days when I can barely make it to lunchtime, and I'm just tapping into that and being okay with it. So it's going back to that idea of just working with what comes your way, with what you're needing at the time. So I don't know if that answers your question about intermittent fasting. I think also what I've seen is some literature and some discussions around actually post-menopause is a great time for intermittent fasting. So once we've gone through all this turbulent time, once the adrenals have kicked in and they're making the hormones, but once they're sort of like being nourished and looked after, that's a good time to fast intermittently. But it's really not the first place to go. But I think it really taps into people's desperation to want to feel better or lose weight. And, all these experts are telling us, and do you know what I mean? And then we end up with this real kind of, I'll do it because it sounds like it's going to help me. And it most of the time doesn't, if we haven't prepared ourselves for it.
It's the weight thing every time for people, like, and they can tell me differently, and I won't believe them. Like, people skipping a meal thinking they're saving calories, like that's what it is. No, I'm really interested in to hear your take, because I'm in the same place as you. Sarah Gottfried's another one who like talks about it for menopause as well. So it'll be interesting, like when I get to that stage and playing with it and stuff. But yeah, I'm the same place as you. I'm still in the camp of getting 3 meals a day. I just think maybe if we all lived in tribes and chilled out most of the day and danced and didn't do much, then we could skip breakfast, right? But in our world, in our lifestyle, in the fact that we have the artificial lights, we have, the lifestyles that we do with stress and all those things, I don't think our adrenals are in a place to, like you say, to support the progesterone production if we're not ovulating. If we start skipping meals, we're going to have that raised cortisol. So we skip a meal, our cortisol is going to go up. So all those different things. So yeah, I'm exactly the same as you. 3 meals a day, 4 to 5 hours between. Try and have your last meal 6 to 7 p.m. Have a 12 to 14 hour fast overnight. That's a great fast. That's a great time for your gut to have a nice clean up, for the body to get a good night's sleep, to rest and repair as much as possible. And if that's too long a stretch, if anyone's finding themselves waking, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever it is, you might need a pre-bedtime, sourdough with some almond butter. I find works really well for people. Other people say just have a tablespoon of coconut oil, but I actually like to give people a little bit of carb with it. That can actually stop that night waking as well, because that's your blood sugar crashing, and your adrenals then kick it in to raise that blood sugar. So
exactly. I mean, my personal experience, I tried intermittent fasting quite a few years ago now, but when it first came out, and obviously no one was talking about women and hormones, I threw myself into it. I couldn't sleep. I was a nervous wreck every night. I'd lie there and I'd be like this, and I'd be like, this is very strange. This said that everybody tells me it's good for me. So, and I crashed, and I did do my thyroid at that point, and it was verging on the hypo, so low thyroid. It was starting to push to that, because I just wasn't supporting myself at all, and that's when I stopped that. But when all the messaging is how good it is for you and blah blah blah, you just think, well, I'll try it. So
yeah. And I also find that if I because I don't do this, I always have breakfast. So there was one day randomly we were going down to visit my husband's family. I hadn't managed to have breakfast before we left because we were in a rush. And so by the time we got there, obviously I was absolutely starving, 11:30, desperate to eat. And then I couldn't fill myself up for the rest of the day. It was like I set my blood, and you know, as they say, you know, how you set your blood sugar up for the day is how it then stays for the day. You can actually get away with being a bit naughtier later in the day if you set it up right at the start. But because I'd missed breakfast, I was just like ravenous and almost couldn't catch up. And then, you know, you end up eating way more anyway and feeling rubbish. Okay, cool. So business. Let's talk about business a little bit. We might come back to hormones in a bit. Something I love about you, just watching you from the outside, and you might tell me I'm wrong, right? Maybe it's just that whole Instagram versus reality thing, you're not sharing everything, but I feel like you've created a business that really works for you. I feel like your life feels quite spacious. Obviously, you travel between Spain and the UK. Like, I don't see you like sat at your desk like 24/7, just like back to back. Like, is this true? Is this a myth? Like,
no, it is actually true. I'm really, really like, one of my things is never to portray this unrealistic, idealistic lifestyle. You know, like I'd love to be real about my hormone health, and I like to be real about my life. I'm very fortunate because I actually was born in Gibraltar and my family live in Gibraltar and Spain. So my family is all based in Spain, but I married a Londoner and we've been living in London for, oh my gosh, like 25 years or something. So that's what gives me that opportunity. You know, my life, and my life has always generally spanned two places, like Gibraltar and Spain, and then somewhere else, right? So that's that. And I think it is important, and this has taken many, many years. And there's been, you know, I was thinking about this earlier when I was like, oh, we're going to talk about business. Like, I honestly think setting up and running your own business is the biggest sort of way you can self-develop and expand and grow, and the biggest hair puller of all, right? Like, it's just, there's so much going on, so much learning, so many mistakes. And you know, for me, you know, you I don't know if you've probably seen those memes that are like, oh, you know, being an entrepreneur means stopping to work for someone else for 40 hours and working for yourself for 80 hours a week, you know, those kind of memes and stuff.
So true.
For me, it's like, I did kind of throw myself into that at the beginning, but especially with the cyclical living, it's like, I just don't want to do this. And I get to decide how I do this, you know, like how I run this business. And I really have to say, a lot of putting in cyclical practices really, really helped me align more my business to one that feels more expansive, more spacious. I still have masculine structures in my business. I still have a certain level of consistency. It's not like a linear line, right? It's not like, but there is consistency there. And it's all about playing about with what really works for me, and also honoring those ebbs and flows, those hormonal ebbs and flows. Sometimes, you know, the compassion that has to come with the days, you know, when you show up and your hormones are raging and your self-doubt is through the roof, and you're like, I went through one of those last week. Like, I literally, you know, I went through one of those when I was like, I've got nothing to say to the world. This was last week, right? It was like, who wants to listen to me? I don't know what to say. Same. The difference is that at least now I'm like, okay, I know how to hold myself in that moment. I know that acknowledging it is really important. I know I just need to wait and allow it to just move through my body. And then eventually, you know, I've got my little tools. Sometimes I need to watch a video or something to re-inspire me. Like, sometimes it's got to be like a really deep hormone testing tutorial to get me back into the zone. Sometimes it's like a bit of coaching. Do you know what I mean? And then I'm like, okay, slowly come out of it. But, you know, having said that, like, when I first started this, and especially when I was in my mid-30s, which was when I was really starting up my business, my solo, my one-to-one clinic, that's when my progesterone was dipping and my self-doubt was at its highest. And I was kept on following all these like, you know, like these massive like bro marketing types in the US who'd be like, click funnels and blah, 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 blah. And I'd just be like you, I'm in a mastermind with people. And we were in a mastermind with a lot of men, not just, you know, men manifesting generators, but probably manifesting generator men.
Yeah.
I'd just be like, what's wrong with me? I can't do this. Like, they would consistently every day show up in the same way, you know. I'd wake up one Monday morning, like bang smack in my luteal, and I'd be like, I can't do anything today.
Yeah.
And it's taken a long time to figure that out, you know, and learn for myself that I don't have to show up in that way.
Yeah, it's resonating so much because it's really interesting because what I've realized is this time of year last year was the time of year I was having massive thoughts about going back to corporate again. Like really missing my old job, really missing working with, you know, loads of agencies, that collaborative approach, you know, the teamwork, the getting out of the house and not just living on Zoom all the time, like all of this stuff. And then it's happened again this year, exactly the same time. And I was actually, well, I actually think it's an astrology thing and not a hormone thing, but because the sun's currently my 4th house, which is like the house of like the home and family. And it's that time of year. You know, my little one turned 2 at the weekend. It was my wedding anniversary at the weekend. My eldest birthday's in December. We've got Christmas. There's like my husband's birthday coming up. Like this time of year is such like a family time. And I actually think, I said it last year, I ended up taking December off because I was working with Amy at the time, and she'd said to me, because she was obviously looking at my astrology and telling me why I felt the way it was, but she was like, you need to detach out of your business for like 4, 6, 8 weeks. Like just don't even think about it, get on with life, and don't even think about it. Obviously you got clients to serve, but like don't think about it. And I did. And I was like, right, next December I'm taking December off because I know what I felt like this time, and I haven't. And if anything, I've probably got one of my busiest schedules, and I, like I said, like I just feel exhausted.
Yeah.
And I just want to like go inwards and just like nest and think about the kids and stuff. So yeah. And so I think as women, you know, we've got that seasonality going on with our menstrual cycle, but then we've also got seasonality going on in life. And like every other business in the world has seasonality. You know, I've worked in the travel industry, the beauty industry, the homewares industry, like all the different industries, they all have some level of seasonality. But this space, this coaching, healing space seems to push this narrative that like we can be the same all the time, and that like money doesn't need to drop, and we can always be going up. And there's this like noise coming out, and you're like, oh, I can't take my foot off the pedal because I need to continue to grow, because we can't have like we can't pull back. And it's like, well, why are we being so hard on ourselves? Like we're solopreneurs, you know, we are the face of the business, like we are the brand, and like we need to rest. And like to your point, I literally said this to my husband like the week it was either this weekend or the weekend before, and I was like, because he runs his own business as well, and I was like, I just need a holiday.
Yeah,
I just need a holiday. We had 2 weeks off in August, and we did both pull back from our businesses, to be fair, and it was amazing. But it's like 2 weeks a year is not enough. Like if you're in corporate and you were getting 2 weeks a year, you'd be fuming. You'd be like, I need more holiday. And then that's also like, because even the week, I mean, I don't know how you find it, but like even the weekends, like there's just an always on energy of running your own business. It's like, oh, should I post on social media? Oh, I had just an idea. Should I do an Instagram post and get it out like while I'm in the energy?
Yeah.
You know, all that kind of stuff. And oh, if I leave it till Monday, I might not be in the energy anymore, and it might not land, and then I won't do it. And obviously someone needed to hear it. And it's like, you're always thinking about it. And I just think more people, I'm sure people do talk about this, right? Maybe it's just the people I'm surrounding myself with, but I really think more people need to talk about like the fact that we can go at different paces at different times of year, at different times in the month, and all the different things, and we don't have to be 24/7. And we're not serving our clients to their best when we're exhausted and depleted.
Yeah.
In fact, I had a kickoff with a client last week and I cancelled it. Because I cancelled it about an hour and a half before we're due to start, because I said, look, it was like a 90-minute kickoff, and I said, I just can't serve you in the way you deserve to be served. So like, can we push back? And she was like, yes, I want you to take care of yourself. You are no good to me. And I'm like, but we make these stories up that we can't like move things in our diary and everything. It's like, no, we can. Like people know we're human. And particularly if, you know, someone's coming to you for holistic health support, they're going to understand. Like they're gonna, you know what I mean? It's like, anyway, so I'm going off on one now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think it's fascinating because, you know, maybe consciously, outwardly, we're like, we're all about seasonal, cyclical living, embracing this and that. But the internalized patriarchy, internalized linear way of progressing is so deep that we are constantly battling this, you know, like.
That's the other thing, that it's like, you know, when we have so much evidence that working hard and doing and forcing and hustling has got us success in the past, and I don't know if again this resonates, like, but that's very much my story. It's like I was the hardest working, so I did the best. and it's like I was available the longest hours, so I got the high, you know, it's like it's been a lot of deconditioning for me. Thankfully I've had incredible mentors to support that, you know, like Aisha and Amy, and people who are like projectors and they like live that kind of life. It's like, you know, we need to create that new evidence for ourselves that actually we can be successful without being on 24/7, by working less hours, by taking care of ourselves, you know, all these different things that society doesn't necessarily support us in.
And I think, you know, for me, that whole thing has been a real path of learning and understanding, because for a while I also went down that route of, oh, you can just sit back and do nothing. I think for a while that was the real message, and it was like all these, and it was incredible to see that was an antidote, right, to all the stuff we'd seen earlier, but seeing like all these women show up and say, I only work 5 hours a week and I'm a millionaire, and you're like, oh. And it was helpful, but it was also damaging in some ways, because then you're like, well, what's wrong with me? Because I cannot set up a successful business doing 5 hours a week and blah, blah, blah. And it's, again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's about what truly, truly works for you. And that's combining things like your human design, your astrology, your hormones, your personality, your condition, all of that, and put it together. Like for a while, I also rejected any kind of masculine structure in my business. I need a masculine structure, right? I have to sit down every night, like at the end of my working day, whatever time that is, I have to sit down, review how my day has gone, and then look at my calendar for the next day on a pen and piece of paper, because I'm old school, write down the times of my appointments, what I need to do, and my main aim for the next day. And that has been like a lifesaver, because I was rejecting that for so long. I was like, well, that's not very feminine. I'm not going with the flow, you know, and all of this. And I was really, really struggling with that. And I was actually starting to wake up very anxious. And that's interesting, right? Tying into what we were saying about perimenopause. I had the anxiety from the hormones being all over the place, plus the anxiety that I didn't have a structure to my day, that I didn't know what I was doing. And I needed that. And finally, I recognized that I just don't have structure is the issue, because my husband used to say to me, I think you need a bit more structure, because he helps students all the time with revision timetables. He supports people in their learning, and he's looking at me from an outside point of view. He's like, babe, I really think you need a bit of structure. And I'd be like, shut up, typical man. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't need structure. I need to flow. And it wasn't working. So I think that's another big message from today, is you've got to find what works for you and match it up to your energy, to everything, you know, and that's how you can really show up fully in your business, I think.
Yeah, I've got an old school like calendar that I write every single thing down that I have to get done that day, and like I always put too many things on and don't get them done, but I have to use that, like, because yeah, I'm the same, pen and paper. It's like, okay, these are the things that need to get done today, and also not aiming for too much as well. I think this is really important. It's like, you know, some people say, who is it? Oh, I wish I knew. It was one of the big marketing greats. He's like, one thing a day. And I think 3 things a day is probably like more achievable. Or maybe he does say 3 things a day, but I remember him saying it and it was like, yeah, maybe it's 3. Maybe it's 3 things a day. Because I remember him saying something like 1,000 something things a year. It was like, that's a good achievement to have done like 1,000 something things a year. And it's like, yeah, serve your clients. Show up on social media if you want to. Let's talk about social media, because you are so good at it. And what I love about you, when you were just saying then about doing what works for you, I was like, yeah, also being on the social media channel that works for you, or like, you know, wherever that is, if it's a podcast, if it's Instagram, if it's TikTok, if it's blah, 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 blah. But what I love about you is you bring your personality across, like it, you know, one of your posts is you. And I think when Reels came in, like you jumped on them really quick and you really started to have fun with them, which I think was really, really great for getting your personality across. Do you do TikTok or is it just Instagram?
No, I haven't quite got there yet. I'm sort of on the fence. I'm like, maybe not. But at the moment, I'm like, oh, I don't know if my brain can cope with another platform. But you know, I'm not rejecting it fully. It has to feel expansive for me, and it has to feel like I'm going to enjoy myself on there. Yeah, but I mean that was from years and years of trial and error, you know, like most business owners. I started off thinking, and I think especially health practitioners, you know, all of our lot, we're very like, oh no, I don't like it on there. Oh, and we're, we turn up with a terrible attitude, really, which is hilarious. You know what I mean? And I still feel like that sometimes, and that's okay. And this comes from years and years of following what other people have told me to do, and then realizing it doesn't work for me. And really, it's about just, this nowadays, you are your brand, and you just, if embrace who you are, and every time, if in doubt, be more you every time. Do you know what I mean? Like more and more and more you, and that's the only way to do it. Like, because that's when you really come across as being aligned and congruent with your messaging, and people can get to know you. Like, I know a lot of people say, oh, social media is a lot of hard work. But if you think about it, we've never, ever before in time had this opportunity for so many people to get to know us for free, and like I think when I first started nutrition, it was pamphlets and little business cards and horrific networking meetings full of horrible, like slimy men, who were like selling you. They were almost like door-to-door salesmen, and I felt so out of place in these sort of areas. And then social media comes along, and you're like, my people, finally, like I can connect with the people who want to hear my message and who need to hear my message. And I think for me, I don't, I wouldn't say it's a love-hate relationship with social media. I really try to watch it and, again, tap into when it's serving me and when it isn't serving me. Like I said, I've just come out of a week of thinking, I've got nothing to say. No one wants to hear what I've got to say. One of those classic weeks when Instagram decides not to show your post to anyone. You pour your heart and soul into this post, and you get like no engagement, and you're like, and that's a point when you just got to sit down and go, okay, I can't hand my worth over to this algorithm. I believe in what I'm saying. I'm going to go away. I'm not going to even go on there once. I'm just going to allow myself some space, some time. I'm going to allow my hormones to shift. And when I feel ready, I'm going to come back when I've got something to say, and then come back, because again, it's this idea of consistency. We need to be consistent to a point, but we can be inconsistent in our consistency. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I did this. I ended up taking, because I run the two different accounts, I'm very inconsistent on them, but like I'm consistent, like I post most days, but I don't necessarily post on both accounts most days. Or sometimes like I'll do something and I like tag it on both if it feels relevant, if it's like about burnout, and it's like, oh, it can go on both the women's health and the business coaching one. But I actually did a post yesterday because I found like I became a bit of a slave to the algorithm, and I started doing things that I thought would help the algorithm. And so I went through a phase a couple of months ago, and I kind of got that whole 7-second loop where you do the trending audio and you'd put this hook and blah, blah, blah. And you get like 13,500 reach, and you'd be really happy because it's like, it's popping off. Great. And you'd get a few more followers in. But then what I found was like, those followers don't then engage with anything else. So they just damage the algorithm. But also like, I didn't feel like it was authentic to me because I'm a long form content girl, right? I talk a lot. And so I didn't enjoy doing hook, read the caption, and then do the caption. And I did it for a bit. And then yesterday, I was just like, I just put on my stories. I was like, I am sick of creating content for the algorithm, not for consumers. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure I'll include some of those when it feels like it kind of works with a trend, or like it feels authentic to do it. But I was like, I'm a talk to camera. Like the old reels I used to do like 12 months ago, I used to just do like 30-60-second reel, and I'd talk through something and I'd educate people on something. And I was like, yesterday I was feeling the call. I'm going to film one of those reels, post it last night. Reach was shocking, like absolutely shocking. But I'm like, it's got to be authentic. And if that is the content I want to produce, if the reach is shocking, but I trust that is like, people get to know me. Like if, if I'm speaking to camera, people get to know me. And then like, oh, it's like, oh, Lynda's someone like I want to learn from. Like, that's got to be better for my business than doing 13,500 reach on a random thing just because it had a,
it's just not, I think focusing on the numbers is also somewhere where we've got to be really, really careful, right? Like the numbers ultimately don't really mean that much half the time, because if your business is based on one-to-one clients or small groups, you don't need huge numbers. What you need are the aligned clients, the clients who just love what you say and that you love. I mean, when I always have like a discovery call before I work with someone one-to-one, and it's been years since somebody has popped on that has not been aligned. I sometimes pause and I go, my one-to-one clients are amazing, and they often reflect back to me what I'm going through or I'm thinking, and we kind of journey together. And it's like, I love showing up for these clients. And that's because, I feel anyway, is because, I'm not going to be like something the algorithm wants me to be. Sometimes I'm lucky and the algorithm likes what I've done in that sense, right? Sometimes I'm not, but it doesn't matter, because it's that slow, steady putting out who you are and really genuinely, because I'm really passionate about really unpicking a lot of like wellness industry philosophy, perfectionism, this idea that if we're hormone experts, we've always got good hormones, that we eat perfectly. I'm really passionate about destroying all of these things. So as a consequence, I get clients turning up who are just so curious about the way we approach life, and so willing to do the deeper work. And we go into the coaching side, and of course the food is there, but we do so many more layers, that the whole experience, not just for them, but for me, is transformative. And we're talking about real life, full on transformation, and this is not me going, oh, work with me and I'll blah, blah, blah. It's not that, but we're talking about cellular transformation, at that level where people's relationship with food changes, or their relationship with their bodies changes, or with their, I've worked with clients who have left their partners. I've worked with clients who have left their jobs. I've worked with clients who have moved countries. And you would think that what's that going to do with hormone nutrition? But we go there because when we start working together, they know me quite well already, and I've really put out all these signals, right? So then what happens in that container is magical. So that's one way of looking at it. The algorithm is never, ever, ever going to do that for you, ever. It's just going to get you a whole load of, strange people. Like my best performing posts have also attracted the strangest people and the weirdest comments. And I'm just like, what? You know what I mean? I'm like, clearly, one of my best posts was about air fryers being bad for your hormones because of the plastic inside.
Yeah.
You won't believe how much hate I got for that. It was like, what are you talking about? Oh, you typical. And I was just like, what? Like, okay. So be careful what you wish for, because really,
Yeah. Oh my God. It's okay. So many things to say. Firstly, I love that how aligned you and me are in terms of like, we're nutritionists and we're so super chilled with our food, because maybe exaggerating, but like I get a thing where clients come in and they probably research more than I do. Like they're super clean already. It's like they're doing all the right things. They're doing incredible things. And I always joke with them and I'm like, look, I'm not going to tell you what to eat. You're eating better than I do. But like, we need to really work on your self-worth, your boundaries, ask for help, like whatever it is, right? That's the first thing. Because I think people become, I want people to relax more. I want people, particularly as someone who's had anorexia, orthorexia, like I just wish people would relax a little bit more and enjoy life a little bit more. So that's one thing. But the wellness industry, I'm so glad you said this, because I'd forgotten we were going to talk about this. So you did a post yesterday and I was like, this is so, and you'd said, are you fed up of like the wellness industry or something? And I'm like, I'm literally calling it like wellness industry fatigue. Like I am the person, I used to work for a bed brand and I brought in like sleep wellness. It was, my campaign was around sleep wellness, and everyone used to like joke I was really into like well-being and stuff, and they didn't know like my secret life in the background, like and I was like, yes, I am very into wellness, like a nutritionist, don't you know? But yeah, so I'm like queen of like wellness and stuff, but then I'm like, I feel like I'm getting sick of it, because I'm getting sick of like anybody can become this wellness influencer. And if you've got the right body shape and you look a certain way, then you can then endorse a brand and talk about how incredible this product is and how it's changed your life, even though it probably didn't, because you probably looked like that before you started taking it. But then everyone starts buying that product thinking it's the best thing ever. But actually, is that product something A, they even need? B, does it even work? Has it, because again, people are creating wellness brands. And I mean, I don't know, there probably are processes where they have to have certain things regulate, but it's like, we know like how many of these products are just like, I mean, you have to go to supermarkets and if these products are getting sold don't have biochemically available active ingredients, they're not actually going to make much difference in the body. They could be making things worse. But like, people get to sell these things, and I get frustrated that people think they need to do these really restrictive things, or they can take a pill and then have a miracle cure tomorrow, and they don't want to accept the fact that they've been wrecking their body for the last 15 years and it's going to take them a bit of time. Coming back to that weight thing, I always actually say, you know, if some people might need to gain weight before they lose weight, if they've had a chronic stress and they have this chronic cortisol production piece, and they've got that cortisol belly, they need to start like eating more and relaxing more to actually get their body back to a state of homeostasis. Like, they might gain a little bit of weight before their body actually comes to homeostasis and loses it. No one wants to hear that. Everyone wants the quick fix. It's this like immediate results kind of society. So yeah, I am in a place of, I've really pulled back from like my health account, to be honest, recently, because I kind of got to this place of like, I'm sick of like competing, inverted commas, with the noise out there, and the stuff that has no evidence behind it, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You know where I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's allow you to have your rant.
I think, you know, for me, I first started hearing about this a few months ago, like colleagues and stuff are mentioning it more and more. And there was a sense of anxiety that we were all going to like be out of jobs and no more clients. And then I was like, hang on a minute, let's get a bit more curious. Let's go into this a bit more. What's going on here? Because, you know, I talk to women every single day who have gone to the GP, been ignored, and are desperate for support and solutions. So I'm not seeing that fatigue in that sense, but I'm hearing about it from other quarters. So I was like, there's clearly a need for wellness support. There clearly is a need for what we do, but it's getting mixed up with this industry, this multi-billion-dollar industry, right? And it was like just going a bit deeper, and sort of, I think it's, first of all, like these insincere promises about these miraculous transformations that are going to take place, not necessarily just with products, but with programs. I see especially the menopause space is full of like flat tummy programs and this and that and the other, you know, really honing in on that fear and that pain. So it's insincere promises. And it's always this kind of subtle messaging that if it doesn't work, it's actually your fault. You know, there's never any responsibility taken by the person offering the program or selling you the product. If it doesn't work, tough shit. You are the problem, not us. And it's not taking everything into consideration. Like you said, you know, like with cortisol, you may need to gain weight before you even go anywhere near losing weight. How is a 4-week menopause flat belly program going to address that? It's not. So what happens? You walk away and you feel like an absolute failure. And I think that's where the fatigue has come from, because the wellness industry, especially as we know it now, has been around for a while now with all, you know, with social media, the expansion, the growth. And I think that's where it's really come, because before you had to go to like some crazy naturopath down a side street somewhere with loads of herbs and stuff, right? That was wellness for a long time. And they would tell you to eat a macrobiotic diet and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, all these beautiful people came on camera and drank green smoothies all day and all of this kind of stuff. And I think we are now getting to the point where the wellness industry has been pushing the same messages for a long enough time that people are realizing it's not working. You know, like, because I have done training programs that have taught me how to sell one of these $1 million programs, and I have felt uncomfortable from the minute I have joined the program. I'm like, oh, you know, but again, going back to the business side of things, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. But you ignore it because you're like, well, I've been told that if I follow this step-by-step process, I can sell this program, blah, 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 blah. And this happened to me a lot. And it would just feel insincere. And just like, I remember once, because my take, I put together a program for polycystic ovaries. And I remember having a few coaching sessions with somebody running this program, one of the coaches, and they were like, I voiced my concern that I said, I don't think I can claim that I will cure you of your polycystic ovaries. That doesn't feel right to me. I can help, and we can create community where we can support each other. And the coach was like, well, you're never going to get any sales like that. You need to tell them that you're going to transform them fully, and they're no longer going to. And it felt so wrong in my body. And that's what's wrong with the wellness industry. I think still there is a huge part of it that is still just insincere and just trying to monetize on our fears and our pain and our discomfort, you know. And that's what I'm really keen about saying. Look, hormones are hormones. You're going to get challenges again and again and again and again, you know, but what tools do we have to support ourselves? You know, what strategies are there? How can we get to know our bodies so that we're not punishing ourselves? It's so much deeper. That's the thing. I feel so much of it is very superficial when it comes to wellness industry messaging. And actually there's so many other layers, that we need to address. So that's, I think, the main part of my rant.
There's like, add this superfood powder and add this and that, and I'm if you wanna, I don't want to go off because I've literally just seen the time and I'm like, oh my God, I can't keep you all day. So I could talk to you all day. Let's talk about your new membership you've got coming, which I didn't realize was coming. This is so exciting. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, so this is really come in a response to everything I've been feeling and kind of observing online and feedback I've had time and time again. So I am going to be opening up the doors to a membership called Hormonal in January, February. It really does depend. Like, I'm very fluid about when it goes out. It's got to be like when I've got the energy, like you say, in the focus. And it's going to be a membership where anyone who has a menstrual cycle or has had periods or any hormonal struggle can come along and just be witnessed in their messiness. There's obviously going to be support, as in how to eat. There will be practical things like recipes and all of that. But it's also a place where we can just be like, my PMS is horrific today. And we can all be like, okay, yes, we're witnessing you in that, like it's not like going to be like this toxically positive place. It's going to be a place where we get real about our hormones. And I've done quite a few festivals in the last few years over the summer. I do period and hormone workshops there. And I am always amazed by the number of people that turn up to these workshops. Literally Sunday, 11 a.m. at a festival that's been going since Thursday, people turn up, hungover, drunk, and I'm like, you've come, and they really want to know this stuff because I think, there's an overload of information. You can't really always work out what the sort of like good information and support is. And then there's the gaslighting that comes with the medical community. So for me, I've noticed that there's a real need for a space like this, like you can come in and ask a question. You'd be like, I think my hormones are wonky. My doctor keeps on saying there's nothing wrong. My bloods have come back okay. You can come to this space and I'll be like, okay, well, show me your bloods. Okay, TSH is actually 5 point something or 4 point something. So actually, you probably do need to investigate a bit further. It's like a place to signpost as well, send them to the right places for support, all of that. So yeah, it's a big not undertaking, but like there's so many things that you can use this space for. But I really feel that I really want to be able to, give people access to me in a different way, in a group setting where we can learn from each other as well, and just share and just be hormonal together.
I love that. That's so good. Did you ever launch your PCOS course, or did that never?
No, it never felt right to me. I used all the marketing, I did all the Facebook ad strategies, and I did get quite a lot of one-to-one clients from it, but I never ever converted them onto the course because it didn't feel right. I couldn't, my body was just screaming like no, so I never did it.
Fascinating. Yeah. Have you ever done a group program?
Yeah, I've done a cyclical living one, which I've done a few times, which I really, really enjoy because it's lighthearted and fun and things like that. And now this is the next big group thing. And I've done sort of more smaller programs as well. And I used to do a lot of in-person programs in the days before, before COVID, really. I used to do group stuff as well in person.
Yeah. Well, the membership sounds incredible and so needed. And let's just like normalize being women and just like being a little bit cray sometimes.
Yeah, and because the difference that takes place in your body, the minute you stop pushing, like, oh, I need to get out of this mood. Like when you're like, you know what, I am in a bad mood. I'm just going to own it, like over the years, I've got better at communicating that to my husband. Like he can tell straight away, but are you okay? And in the old days, I'd be like, oh, I'm fine, or bottle it in. And now I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I'm really pissed off with you because you did this and I didn't want, and I'm angry and I'm not going to apologize, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, okay, and we just put it out there and then it's fine and it's done. I'm like, oh, I feel so much better now, because I've voiced what I'm going through. I think a lot of what we experience is the struggle to repress what we're going through, and rather than just owning it. And once you do that, you're like, yep, I'm hormonal today. Yes, I am pissed off. So
yeah. And it's like, it ties in with this whole, like, we don't need to be perfect. Like perfection doesn't exist. And we're okay to have emotions and feelings and needs and wants and desires. And
exactly.
And it's not too much. I have loved this conversation. I can't believe that hopefully the Zoom recorded it all, considering if you missed it, we kind of went down for a few moments. Tell everyone how they can find you, how they can work with you. Obviously, we're going to put everything in the show notes as well, but yeah, tell them all.
Yeah. So I am most active on Instagram. So come along and say hello at hormones_in_harmony. You can also drop me a message via my website, which is hormonesinharmony.co.uk. I'm the co-host of the Femme Powered podcast as well, which you will be coming on soon as well once we get our act together. This is business our way. So yeah, whenever. Those are really the main ways. And, you know, please don't ever feel like you can't drop me a DM or ask me a question. Really, it's, you know, like I'm boundaried about when I go in and out of there. So don't feel like you're overburdening me. I really, you know, if I can support you in any way or point you in the right direction, or sometimes all I have to do is send you like a reel that I've seen or a recipe that I've seen, you know, it's really as simple as that. So please feel free to reach out with any questions from today or anything at all. I'm always happy to hear from anyone and everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And please do share if you notice that, like, how hormones full stop or transitioning into the perimenopause, going through the perimenopause, running your business has impacted your business. Please share with us, because we would love to hear. Thank you so much, Giulietta. Guys, if you love this conversation, please do give it a share so we can reach more people. Give us a little review. It's on all the different podcasting platforms and YouTube, and I'll see you again next week. Thank you, gorgeous girl.
Bye.